Every morning before the sun painted the sky, Zuri wrapped her books in a torn cloth, pulled on her overused slippers, and placed a cardboard box over her head. The box had 2 uneven holes cut for her eyes, and the sides were patched from where rain had softened the cardboard. It wasn't a costume. It was a shield, a way to survive in a world that treated her face like a crime. Zuri was born with burned scars that stretched across her cheeks and chin. No one in the village remembered how it happened, only that her mother had died in the fire and her father left soon after. The scars weren't just on her skin. They lived in the whispers of other parents, in the flinches of strangers, in the cruel giggles behind her in class. Zuri never looked up when she walked. Not because she feared the ground, but because she feared the faces around her. The villagers didn't try to understand. The children, taught by their elders' silence, mocked her. They called her names that stuck like thorns. A monster, a burnt girl, and the one she hated most in Carton face. But Zuri went to school every day. She endured every laugh, every cruel word, every stare that lingered too long, because somewhere in her, under the scars and pain, lived a spark that whispered, "You still deserve to learn." No teacher asked her to remove the box. Perhaps they thought they were being kind. Perhaps they were afraid. But no one told the other students to stop laughing either. Zuri didn't cry in front of them. She saved her tears for nights when the wind blew through holes in the roof, and the moonlight caught the edges of her silent weeping. And yet, every day she showed up. She faced the very world that told her to hide. That, though no one said it, was a courage many grown men could not match. Her feet moved not because she had confidence, but because she had determination. And that determination would soon change everything. Zuri's skin had long healed from the burns, but her soul carried fresh wounds that reopened daily. Every time someone gasped or laughed or avoided eye contact, it tore her open in ways no flame ever could. No medicine soothed the ache of being unwanted. No bandage covered the feeling of being stared at like a mistake. There were nights when she would sit outside under the mango tree, box beside her, and trace the sky with her fingers. The stars never looked away. The wind never laughed. The night became her only friend, the one place she felt seen without judgment. Yet when morning came, she knew she had to return to the world that only saw her as a shadow. At school, the teachers pretended to care. They gave her good grades and whispered about her at the staff room table. Poor girl, they said, but no one asked her how she felt. They were too afraid to be near her truth. She noticed how people chose sympathy over connection. How they'd rather feel sorry than be present. Inside her, there was a voice, small, almost silent, that whispered, "You are more than this box." But fear drowned it daily. Fear of being seen. Fear of being rejected again. The carton gave her control over how much of her face the world could mock. It was both prison and protection. She hated it, yet couldn't let it go. Zuri didn't want to be pitied. She wanted to be understood. But she didn't know that sometimes the understanding we seek isn't from the world. It's from one unexpected soul brave enough to see past the scars. The children at Zuri's school didn't punch or kick her. No, their weapon was laughter, and they used it well. Every step she took into the schoolyard was met with giggles, whispers, and mock applause. They'd pretend to trip when walking by her, shout jokes like, "Don't look. She'll turn you into ash." Then they'd laugh like it was all in fun. But laughter, Zuri knew, could cut deeper than knives. It lingered longer than bruises. When people laugh at your pain, they convince themselves they're not being cruel, just playful. That's the trick of cruelty. It wears a smiling mask while tightening its grip around your soul. Even the other girls, the ones who once played with her as toddlers, now kept their distance. They didn't want her shame to rub off on them. She heard them say things like, "If she's cursed or your mother's death marked her." Zuri never answered. The carton hid her tears well. She learned to walk slowly, calmly, even when every cell in her body screamed to run away. Once she dropped her book in the hallway. A boy stepped on it, then looked her in the eyes and laughed. That laugh wasn't from joy. It was from power. It said, "You can't fight back. You don't matter." She picked up the torn book, bowed her head, and moved on. But inside, another layer of trust in the world had cracked. People often say children are innocent, but Zuri had learned otherwise. Cruelty is taught, and when taught through silence, it becomes louder than any scream. And yet, she endured it. Not because she was used to it, but because she still believed deep down that one day someone might laugh with her, not at her. Monday, everything changed. A stranger arrived at the school, an elderly man with a walking stick, a wide-brimmed hat, and eyes that didn't move. He was blind. Introduced as a traveling artist who painted by touch, the school invited him to teach about perception and creativity. The children were excited. They whispered about what he would paint. No one imagined that Zuri would be part of the lesson. During his session, the man asked if he could feel someone's face, to see through his fingers. No one volunteered. Nervous laughter filled the room. Then, as if pulled by fate, his hand gently pointed toward Zuri. "The one who sits quietly," he said. "May I?" Gasps. Laughter. Some children chuckled louder than ever. "He wants to touch Carton girl." Someone snorted. The room broke into cruel laughter again. Zuri froze. Her hands clutched the box tighter. Her breathing grew shallow. But then the old man said gently, "Only if you allow me." Said gently, "Only if you allow me." Her hands shook as she lifted the box. Silence fell like a blanket. For the first time, her face was exposed without being forced. The man walked slowly, reached out, and touched her cheeks, her nose, her scars. His fingers were careful, like reading a sacred script. Then he smiled and said, "This face, it tells a story of surviving fire and walking through it. It is stronger than beauty. It is a face of truth. Truth." No one laughed. Not one. In that moment, the carton no longer defined her. The blind man had seen what the eyes of many could not, a soul worthy of being seen. After the session, the artist stayed behind. He asked Zuri if he could paint her, not as she looked, but as he felt her. She hesitated, but something in his voice felt safe. She nodded. The rest of the school day passed in silence. The children no longer shouted at her. They looked away, unsure now, unsure if they'd been wrong all along. The next day, the painting was revealed. It showed a young girl standing amidst flames, but untouched. Her eyes were glowing. Tears. Her scars looked like lightning across her face. Powerful, fierce, alive. Underneath he had written, "She is not hiding. She is holding the fire that never burned her down." Tears filled Zuri's eyes. No one had ever described her with power. No one had looked at her and seen beauty in her survival. It was just one painting, just one line, but it was enough to shift something inside her. A weight lifted. The old man told her, "A people will always see what they're trained to see. But one day, someone will see who you really are, and that will be enough." She nodded. Not because she fully believed it yet, but because it was the first time someone offered her hope instead of pity. And that single moment, that single act of truth became the first brick in the path that led Zuri away from shame and toward self-acceptance. The next week, Zuri came to school without her carton. No warning, no announcement. She walked through the gates with her head held just a little higher. Her scars caught the light, and for the first time, she didn't hide them. Whispers followed, of course. But not laughter? Not anymore. Something had shifted. The story had changed. Some kids avoided her eyes. Some looked at her like they were seeing her for the first time. And in a way, they were. They were not because her scars were gone, but because she had decided they no longer defined her. The teacher smiled awkwardly. No one said much. But Zuri noticed the difference. No one blocked her way in the halls. No one called her names that day. It was as if they were waiting to see what she would do next. And what she did was smile. She smiled when she answered questions. She smiled when she sat alone at lunch, not because she was suddenly happy, but because the fear was no longer choking her. 10 fois. The painting had given her something far more valuable than a new face. It had given her a new story to carry. Zuri realized she was never ugly. She was simply not like the rest. And sometimes the world punishes difference because it fears what it cannot understand. But that fear no longer belonged to her. When Zuri began walking without the carton, the bullies tried again. Not with the same strength, though. Their jokes felt weaker, their words less sharp. They weren't prepared for a Zuri who didn't flinch, a Zuri who looked back. Not in anger, but in calm. The first time someone called her ash face again, she simply said, "A fire doesn't scare me anymore," and walked on. That silence cut deeper than any comeback. For bullies feed on reactions, but when their prey no longer fears them, they shrink. Some of the girls who once laughed at her now asked timid questions. Did it hurt? Oh, why didn't you ever tell us what happened? Zuri didn't need to explain anymore. Her presence, her strength, her refusal to hide. That was her explanation. The cruelest boy, the one who stepped on her books, avoided her now. Maybe he felt guilt. Maybe he felt shame, but Zuri didn't care. She wasn't living to please them anymore. She wasn't trying to be accepted. She was simply being. And in that being, that calm defiance, the bullies lost their hold. Are cool. Because once you stop fearing the people who mock you, they are left with nothing but their own empty laughter. Zuri didn't become a hero overnight. She didn't give speeches or demand justice. Her revolution was quiet, the kind that starts inside, like a seed in dry earth. Her courage grew with every step she took without the box, with every word she spoke in her true voice. She still sat alone sometimes, still heard whispers, but inside, a river flowed where once there was only drought. She smiled more. She helped others when they dropped books. She even laughed, not forced laughter, but real laughter. That was the greatest change. The old Carton sat in a corner of her room now, not thrown away, but kept as a reminder, a symbol of everything she had overcome, of the girl who once thought hiding was the only way to live, of the fire she carried but no longer feared. One afternoon, she sat with a new girl at school, someone with a limp and a stammer. No one spoke to that girl either, but Zuri did. And when the girl said, "Aren't you afraid they'll laugh at you too?" Zuri smiled and replied, "Let them. They only laugh because they're afraid of anyone brave enough to be different." And in that moment, Zuri passed on her courage. A courage born not of noise, but of gentle resistance, quiet strength, and the kind of soul that refuses to hide.